Power does not begin in thrones, governments, or money. It begins in the human mind. Long before a man ever kneels to another, he submits internally. He decides often without realizing it who is above him and who is beneath him. This invisible hierarchy forms the real structure of society. Every empire, every corporation, every relationship rests on this psychological foundation. The greatest mistake people make is believing power is external. They think it belongs to the rich, the famous, the violent, or the lucky. In reality, power belongs to those who understand perception. Whoever controls perception controls emotion. Whoever controls emotion controls decision. And whoever controls decision controls destiny. The human brain is not designed to seek truth. It is designed to seek safety. Safety comes from belonging, from approval, from being aligned with what feels strong and stable. That is why people instinctively gravitate toward confident voices, dominant personalities, and clear authority even when those figures are lying, cruel, or incompetent. The mind prefers certainty over correctness. This is the first secret of power. People do not follow what is right. They follow what feels strong. From childhood, the brain is trained to look upward. Parents, teachers, older students, bosses, politicians, each layer of life conditions the mind to obey. Every time someone accepts a command, a rule, or a social expectation, their brain strengthens a neural pathway. Submission equals safety. Over time, this becomes automatic. By adulthood, most people do not question authority. They crave it. This is why humans often feel anxious when no one is in charge. Chaos terrifies the nervous system. A world without hierarchy feels unsafe, even if it is more fair. So people willingly hand over their freedom to anyone who promises order. That promise is the root of every tyrant and every leader. The mind is constantly scanning for three signals: who is powerful, who is dangerous, and who is safe. When someone appears powerful, the brain assigns them higher status. When someone appears dangerous, the brain avoids them. When someone appears safe, the brain relaxes around them. The true masters of control learn to combine all three. They appear powerful enough to be respected, dangerous enough to be feared, and safe enough to be trusted. This creates psychological captivity. People cannot rebel against what they both fear and rely on. Power is not enforced. It is accepted. Language is one of the most underestimated tools of control. Words do not just describe reality, they shape it. The way something is framed determines how it is emotionally experienced. Call a war a liberation, and people will support it. Call surveillance security, and people will welcome it. Call obedience loyalty, and people will feel proud to submit. The mind does not think in logic. It thinks in stories. Whoever controls the story controls the mind. This is why propaganda is so effective. It does not argue. It repeats. The brain mistakes repetition for truth. Over time, the idea becomes familiar, and familiarity feels safe. Safety feels right. Right feels true. This is how entire populations are programmed. Social pressure is another invisible leash. Humans are wired to avoid exclusion. In ancient times, being rejected by the tribe meant death. That instinct still lives in the nervous system. Even today, being criticized, mocked, or isolated triggers the same fear response as physical danger. So people conform. They pretend. They suppress their doubts. They follow trends, beliefs, and opinions not because they agree, but because they want to belong. The fear of standing alone is stronger than the fear of being wrong. This is why the loudest voice often wins. It is not because it is correct, but because it creates the illusion of majority. Once people believe everyone thinks this, they align automatically. No one wants to be the outcast. Control the crowd, and you control the individual. Most people believe they are independent thinkers. They are not. They are emotional reactors. Their opinions are shaped by what they see others approve of. Their desires are shaped by what they see others chasing. Their fears are shaped by what they see others avoiding. This is herd psychology, and it is the backbone of every power structure. To control a mind, you do not attack it directly. You surround it. You shape its environment. You flood it with signals of what is acceptable, admirable, and safe. The person will then police themselves. This is the genius of modern power. The strongest prisons have no walls. The illusion of choice is one of the most effective psychological tricks. Give people options that all lead to the same outcome, and they will feel free while being controlled. This is how politics works. This is how consumerism works. This is how social media works. People feel in control because they can choose, but they never question what they are choosing between. The mind rarely asks, who created these options? It only asks, which do I prefer? Those who set the menu control the meal. Another deep weakness of the human mind is its need for meaning. People want to believe their suffering has purpose, that their struggle is part of a story. Leaders, religions, and ideologies exploit this by framing obedience as heroism. Work hard, sacrifice, obey, endure, and you will be rewarded. Maybe not now, but someday. This promise keeps people compliant for decades. The future is used as a leash. Hope is a powerful drug. It keeps people tolerating pain they would otherwise never accept. The mind clings to the idea that things will get better, even when evidence says they won't. Those in power understand this. They feed hope just enough to prevent rebellion. Fear and hope are the two levers of control. Fear pushes people away from danger. Hope pulls them toward obedience. Between these two, almost any behavior can be engineered. Most people think manipulation looks like lies and tricks. In reality, it looks like comfort. It looks like being told what you want to hear. It looks like being reassured. It looks like being validated. When someone makes you feel understood, your mind opens. When your mind opens, it becomes programmable. This is why charismatic figures are so dangerous. They do not dominate through force. They seduce through emotion. And once you trust someone, you give them access to your reality. The final truth of power psychology is this: people do not want freedom. They want relief. Relief from responsibility. Relief from uncertainty. Relief from thinking. When someone else makes the decisions, life feels easier. When someone else takes the blame, fear disappears. So people surrender, not because they are weak, but because they are human. And as long as humans remain wired this way, there will always be those who know how to pull the strings. Power is not something you take. It is something people give away, and they do it every single day without ever realizing it. Once you understand that power begins in the mind, the next step is to understand how that power is maintained. Control does not survive on fear alone. Fear creates tension, and tension eventually creates resistance. The most stable power is the kind people protect for you. That is when domination becomes permanent. To reach that level, you must master emotional dependency. Human beings are not just social creatures, they are emotional addicts. From childhood, the brain learns to associate safety with certain people. A parent, a teacher, a protector. When those figures are absent, anxiety appears. That need never disappears. It only changes targets. As adults, people attach that emotional dependence to leaders, lovers, ideologies, and institutions. Whoever becomes emotionally necessary becomes psychologically untouchable. This is why people stay loyal to abusive partners, corrupt governments, and toxic systems. They do not love them. They fear losing the emotional stability they provide. Even pain becomes familiar. Familiar pain feels safer than unknown freedom. Control is strongest when the victim feels they cannot survive without the controller. This is the mechanism behind cult leaders, charismatic politicians, and manipulative partners. They first create connection, then they create reliance, then they slowly remove alternatives. By the time the victim realizes what is happening, their world has shrunk to one source of emotional security, and no one willingly attacks what keeps them emotionally alive. Isolation is the quiet weapon of domination. Separate a person from friends, from other ideas, from other sources of validation, and their reality collapses inward. The fewer perspectives someone has, the easier they are to guide. When there is only one voice in their world, that voice becomes truth. This is why authoritarian systems attack media, education, and independent thought. It is not about information. It is about eliminating competing realities. Control the flow of information and you control the shape of the mind. Even in everyday life, the same pattern exists. Social groups punish those who question. Families silence those who disagree. Workplaces discourage dissent, not through violence, through shame. Shame is more powerful than fear. Fear makes people hide. Shame makes them obey. When someone feels ashamed, they want to regain approval. They will say what they are supposed to say, believe what they are supposed to believe, and behave how they are supposed to behave, not because they agree, but because they want to be accepted again. This is how social conditioning works. Every society creates invisible rules. What is acceptable? What is respectable? What is disgusting? Once these are internalized, no police are needed. People become their own enforcers. This is psychological automation. The most efficient control is when the subject punishes themselves for disobedience. Another layer of domination is identity. When people attach their sense of self to a belief, a nation, a leader, or an ideology, attacking that thing feels like attacking them. They stop evaluating information logically. They defend emotionally. This is why debates fail. You are not arguing with ideas. You are threatening identities. Once power attaches itself to identity, it becomes sacred. Questioning it feels like betrayal. This is how rulers become gods, how movements become religions, how loyalty becomes moral. People will die for what they believe they are. Time is another psychological tool. When people invest years into something, a career, a relationship, a belief, walking away feels like losing a part of themselves. The brain hates wasted effort. It will cling to something broken rather than admit it was wrong. This is called sunk cost, and it traps millions. The longer someone stays under a system, the harder it becomes to leave. This is why early control is crucial. Get someone young, emotionally open, or desperate, and you own decades of their future. But even adults are vulnerable. Trauma weakens the mind. Loss, fear, poverty, heartbreak, all make people seek certainty. In those moments, they become programmable. Crisis is a gateway to control. This is why every power structure uses fear of collapse. Without us, things will fall apart. Without us, you will suffer. Without us, there will be chaos. People do not need to love their rulers. They just need to fear the alternative. Eventually, the controlled stop imagining any other reality. And that is when power becomes absolute. By the time chains are visible, the mind has already surrendered. And once the mind is owned, the body follows. That is how control becomes invisible, and why it is so hard to escape. Once a mind is controlled, it does not feel enslaved. It feels chosen. This is the most dangerous phase of power, when people believe they are acting freely, while being guided. At this level, control becomes invisible, and resistance becomes irrational. The human brain has a deep need to feel special, to feel important, to feel seen. When a system, a leader, or an ideology makes someone feel like they are part of something meaningful, they will defend it with their life, not because it is good, but because it gives them identity. Power uses this hunger. It tells people, you matter because you belong to this. You are valuable because you serve this. You are superior because you believe this. And suddenly obedience feels like pride. This is how nations create patriots, how religions create believers, how movements create fanatics. Once a person's self-worth is tied to a system, that system owns them. The mind also seeks simplicity. The world is complex, uncertain, and overwhelming. Power structures offer easy explanations: good versus evil, us versus them, right versus wrong. These binaries calm the brain. They remove doubt. And doubt is dangerous to control. When people stop questioning, they become predictable. When they become predictable, they become manageable. This is why power rewards loyalty more than intelligence. A loyal fool is more useful than a clever rebel. Information itself becomes a weapon, not by hiding it, but by flooding it. When people are overwhelmed with noise, they stop thinking. They scroll. They react. They consume. The mind becomes passive. Confused minds look for leaders. This is why chaos benefits power. When everything feels unstable, people cling harder to anything that promises certainty. Even false certainty feels better than none. The greatest manipulators do not bring peace. They bring controlled chaos, so they can appear as saviors. Another secret of control is delayed gratification. Promise people a future reward for present obedience, heaven, success, recognition, promotion. Legacy, the future becomes a carrot, and people walk forever toward it. but the reward never arrives, only another promise. This keeps people trapped in a loop of effort and hope is the strongest chain. Guilt is another psychological weapon. When people believe they are wrong, sinful, unworthy, or broken, they seek redemption. Power offers that redemption through loyalty, obedience, and sacrifice. First, it makes you feel small. Then it offers to make you whole. Once someone depends on you for their sense of worth, you control their soul. This is how shame becomes power. Finally, there is fear of isolation. When a person doubts a system, the greatest threat is not punishment, it is being cast out. Humans would rather live in a lie than die alone. So they stay quiet. They pretend. They conform. And slowly, they forget who they were before. At this stage, power no longer needs to watch everyone. The people watch each other. They become the guards, and the prison becomes eternal, because the mind has accepted its cage. And when the mind is owned, freedom no longer feels safe. Power reaches its final and most dangerous form when it no longer needs to prove itself. At this stage, it is not loud, not brutal, not desperate. It is calm, silent, certain. The world bends around it without being told to. People adjust their behavior before any command is given. That is when control becomes absolute. Most people imagine power as something you grab. In reality, power is something that flows toward whatever appears stable, confident, and inevitable. Human beings are drawn to what feels permanent. They resist what feels weak. This is not moral. It is biological. The nervous system seeks safety, and safety is associated with strength, order, and predictability. Whoever provides those becomes the center of gravity in the social world. The most dominant presence in any room is not the loudest. It is the one who looks like they could walk away. Need creates weakness. Detachment creates leverage. When you do not need approval, you gain it. When you do not need validation, you become magnetic. When you do not need permission, you appear powerful. This is the paradox of control. The less you chase it, the more it comes. Desperation repels. Composure attracts. People subconsciously test each other. They push boundaries, offer small disrespect, watch reactions. Those who react emotionally signal vulnerability. Those who remain calm signal authority. This is why silence is one of the most effective displays of dominance. Silence says, I am not threatened. I am not rushed. I am not controlled by this moment. The mind of the observer fills the silence with imagined power. At the highest level of control, you allow others to reveal themselves while you reveal nothing. Information asymmetry is dominance. The more someone knows about you, the more leverage they have. The less you give, the more they project. People will fill your mystery with their own assumptions, and those assumptions often work in your favor. This is why great leaders are often misunderstood, but never ignored. Control also comes from emotional regulation. Whoever controls their own emotions controls the interaction. Anger gives away power. Neediness gives away power. Over-explaining gives away power. When you remain internally steady while others fluctuate, you become the reference point. People orient themselves around you, and what becomes the reference point becomes the leader. The final stage of power is becoming psychologically unavoidable. When people expect you to be there, factor you into their decisions, and fear your absence more than your presence, you have reached dominance. You do not need to threaten. Your existence already shapes behavior. This is how institutions rule. This is how legends endure. True control does not look like chains. It looks like normality. It looks like this is just how things are. When people stop imagining alternatives, power becomes invisible. The mind adapts to whatever environment it is in. Over time, it confuses survival with truth. If something has lasted long enough, people assume it is right. This is how unjust systems survive for centuries. Longevity becomes legitimacy, and legitimacy becomes sacred. The most dangerous form of power is the one that feels natural. Those who master this understand something critical. You do not have to be loved to be followed. You do not have to be admired to be obeyed. You only have to be seen as permanent. When people believe you cannot be removed, they stop trying. Resistance is born from hope. Remove hope, and rebellion dies. This is why regimes focus on crushing imagination, not just opposition. If people cannot imagine a different future, they will accept any present. But there is another side to this truth. If you understand how power controls the mind, you are no longer a prisoner of it. Awareness breaks spells. When you see the mechanism, you stop being enchanted by it. Most people are controlled because they are unconscious of the forces shaping them. They mistake programming for personality. They mistake fear for logic. They mistake conformity for morality. Once you see that, you gain distance. And distance is freedom. You begin to notice how often you are being nudged, pushed, guided. Advertisements telling you what to want. Social pressure telling you what to believe. Authority figures telling you what is acceptable. You realize how rarely you choose. This is not meant to make you paranoid. It is meant to make you powerful. When you see the game, you can play it. Power does not disappear when you understand it. It becomes a tool instead of a cage. You learn when to resist and when to cooperate, when to be visible and when to disappear, when to speak and when to stay silent. You stop reacting emotionally and start acting strategically. This is the difference between being ruled and ruling. The greatest freedom is not escaping the system. It is understanding it so well that it no longer controls you. Life will always be a game of influence, hierarchy, and perception. That will never change. But once you know the rules, you are no longer a victim. You become a player. And players do not beg. They move. They wait. They choose. This is the final secret of power. It is not about dominating others. It is about mastering yourself so completely that nothing else can dominate you. When you are no longer driven by fear, you cannot be controlled. When you are no longer driven by approval, you cannot be manipulated. When you are no longer driven by desperation, you cannot be exploited. That is true power, not over the world, but over your own mind. And that is the only control that lasts forever.